Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming to this meeting.
Hello.
So Susan's out today, so I'll just be filling in for her. I guess let's wait a few more minutes for anyone else coming through. And in the meantime, if anyone has anything else to the agenda that they wanted to add, please go ahead and add it under the agenda items. All right, I think we can get started. First off, welcome, Joshua. I'm not sure if this is your first time at our community meeting, but welcome to the Ratify community meeting.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I think for today, we'll start with the open PRs. So we got a few open PRs. Most of them, I think, are Binbin's PRs. So let's start with the first one. Binbin, do you want to just walk us through a little bit of the changes?
Yeah, sure. So basically, this one is a follow-up for the PR of integrating notation Go RC1. So the previous PR, I just did the very primitive change, and in this PR, I try to move so in notation Go, we have a trust policy stuff, and in my previous PR, this trust policy is mounted as a JSON file. And so in this PR, I try to move it to the verify config so that we can utilize the verify config and the CRD, so we don't need to handle the refresh or updates on this JSON file. Yeah, should we update file too?
Okay, that makes sense. So with this, the actual trust policy document is in the Notary v2 verifier config. So like you said, then the CRD, we can just take advantage of the CRD for the Notary v2 for the updates to
yes.
The okay, cool.
And also, I think the reason I did CPI is that I think the notary trust policy config is part of the notary verifier config. So I think it makes sense to make them in the same place. Otherwise, we need to handle a lot of files for just a notary verifier.
Yeah, that makes sense. I had a chance to go through it a little bit. I think I just had one comment. We might want to update the config JSON that we have as the sample that we provide in the config directory. I just
Yeah.
linked it here. If
Oh,
you think it's
I do
appropriate.
that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I just missed that.
Okay, no worries, no worries.
Thank you.
Cool. Anyone else have any comments on this? Questions? Okay. In that case, let's move on to the next ones. So looks like Bin, you've been working on adding some tests too for the remaining verifiers.
Yes.
Okay.
So one is cosine, one is license tracker, and also I'm working on the spam verifier.
Okay. And for the actually for the SBOM one, I think you had commented on that policy issue that we have with the nested references.
Yes.
Yeah. So let me see if I can bring that up. But I think so the issue for everyone else, the context for that is that right now we have a built-in configuration policy where if you're not using it in a pass-through mode, Ratify, and you want Ratify to return an absolute result for the verification, you can rely on a built-in config policy and where you specify the artifact type as well as the policy itself. So if you want any signature of any artifact of that artifact type to pass through, or you want all of them of that artifact type that we encounter, you can make the gate secure or less secure. So the problem with that is that for nested references, if you define the artifact types at the root level, then how do you apply the same policy for every level of nested artifacts? Do you have a way to configure nested artifact policy, or do we just ignore beyond the root level any policy verification? So I think for now, because we are focusing on the pass-through mode, my vote would be to enforce the policy, the config-based policy at the root level, and then for anything beyond that, it's just not enforced. But if anyone feels differently or has any other suggestions, please let us know.
I posted the link in the channel.
Okay.
Oh, not in channel, in the Zoom chat.
In the chat. Okay. Let me see if I can bring it up.
This is Noel here from Microsoft CC team. We've hit a similar, I think it's the same issue, but it's kind of like manifested in a different way where the second time that you, so right now the way it works is you go through, you might have some policy defined at the root level that might apply to, different artifacts. But as things get executed, that global map gets updated with every artifact type that the basically the verifiers have seen before. Yep. And so you end up at this time where the second time you try to verify an SBOM doesn't have an SBOM. So obviously it doesn't pass. So I think it's the same issue. We kind of worked around it by locally commenting out a line, not to update that global map, but that doesn't really address the root issue, which is, I think, the thing you're talking about.
Yeah, no, that's actually exactly how we found the issue too. The SBOM was being enforced at both levels. Obviously the Band-Aid fix would be kind of, have you mentioned, we can just not have it add to the map as it encounters it. The problem is that we wanted to enforce kind of secure by design. So even if you don't specify extra policy, it's going to treat anything it encounters as being enforceable. I don't know in prioritization wise how we should handle this, if we should just unblock this or if we should invest time in coming out with a better solution to this. But does anyone else have any thoughts?
Would it be possible to not mutate the global map, associated with the config policy itself? And if people wanted to enforce that, they could add that as a they could add that artifact type : all in the config policy to get the same results.
Yeah, I think
this is actually kind of a blocker for us right now.
Okay, yeah, that's actually the best solution to unblock. And if we're comfortable with kind of saying, or we can maybe document it a little clearer that, hey, you're gonna have to add this, if you add any new type of artifact that's not already listed in the default config, then then I'm fine with that as well. So I think we should probably just move forward with that. If you have the fix for that, do you mind just sending a PR for that? Or otherwise we could triage the issue and then see if someone else could pick it up.
Yeah, I will send a PR for that. It's deleting one line out of the config policy just to not update that global map, but I'll send that today after this call.
Perfect, sounds good, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, this is for anything else for the test spin bin that you wanted to talk about, or?
I think it's just for 2 PRs.
Okay.
It is very straightforward.
Okay, sounds good. All right, in that case, let's move to the other agenda items. So I think this first issue is gonna need a little bit of a longer discussion, so maybe we can circle back to that. But let's start with the second one instead then. So the second one, I think these issues are pretty new. Joshua, you had filed this one today. If you want to maybe give us a little bit of context and a short summary.
Yeah, so the basic idea is if you have in your config 2 verifier plugins that would like to verify the same type, currently the way it works is the first one in the config will attempt to verify that, and then the second one will never actually run. And that's due to a break statement in the loop as it's going over that. So it's the first verifier that can verify will attempt to do that. And that's in executor core, and so I don't know if this was an intended thing, if it was just something from the beginning that we had, but it's something we wanted to bring up. I don't know if there's like I can't think of a scenario where you would want to have multiple verifiers for a single type, but I think as a user, it would have been helpful to know, like, if I put that in my config, at least get some kind of warning or something like that. So yeah, that's what this issue is about. And yeah, we can talk about best path forward.
Yeah, I'll add a little bit of context. So we kind of hit this because we tried to enable we wanted to enable the license checker and the SBOM plugin at the same time. We kind of updated those to both work on JSON SPDX format because that's what was inside. So we wanted to make sure that the license for any SPDX was, let's say MIT, and that also the SBOM plugin, ran and it, was valid. But only the first one registered in the config works. And it would be really nice to be able to say, yep, both of these plugins worked. Maybe we've got pass-through mode and we've got some Rego to parse out different things that we want to do with that. But right now, only one works. And so I think a proposed fix, if we wanted to change that behavior, would be to remove the break and change the logic for how is success for the total verification result gets calculated, rather than like just take from the verifier, if any of them are false, set the whole thing to false, and so on. But we wanted to come and ask some questions about, is it intentional to only have one verifier per type? And if so, kind of what's the reasoning behind that?
Yeah, that's a good point. So as far as I know, there wasn't an intention to block for this, but it was the idea that every verifier would probably have its own artifact type. But so you're saying that because the SBOM and the license checker both use the SPDX format, they're going to have the same artifact type, even though there are two different verifiers.
Yeah. So right now they can't share the same artifact type. So we would move that burden onto users and force them to use maybe a non-standard made up type, just so that they could run a second verifier. It'd be really nice to use the standard, the IANA types for the artifact types, and be able to have multiple verifiers run against that same. I mean, if you talk about SPDX, there's all kinds of information you can verify in their licenses, packages, things like that. Specifically in the context of like a CI pipeline, that might make more sense than, against Gatekeeper. But yeah, by forcing everybody to have it all in one bucket or not at all, we're having to come up with some interesting workarounds.
Okay, I don't see a reason not to allow that, but I think Eric is on the call. Eric, are you there?
Yeah, I just joined, sorry.
Yeah, no worries. So basically brief recap. So it looks like the current way we verify, cycle through our verifiers in the execution loop, we stop verifying after we meet the first verifier whose artifact type matches the one of the artifact that we're currently verifying. This works okay if we have unique artifact types for every verifier, but Joshua and Matt were pointing out that for SPDX, for a license checker or an SBOM scenario, they both have the same artifact type, which is SPDX. And in order to get around this, you have to make like a custom verifier with a different artifact type to force Ratify to verify using both verifiers. So the proposal here is to basically remove that break where we break out of the verification loop when we meet the first verifier that works. I don't see any concern with that, but any thoughts off the top of your head?
Yeah, I mean, that seems reasonable. I feel like that was probably the intent anyways, was to apply every verifier that could process that verifier or that artifact type. So I think that's reasonable.
So actually, I have a question on the policy evaluation. So currently we have like two types, like all or any for each artifact type. So in this case, if we have multiple verifier on the same artifact type, do we need to change the policy evaluation? Like for example, if we have a notary signature and we set it to like any type, but now we still want to enforce just one notary signature, but also we want to like enforce like SPDX or license checker verifier.
So this would be in the case where you want to enforce one and only one.
Yeah, maybe we just have one notary one notary signature verified, but for all the verifiers we want all of them like passed. So
okay, I think I'm following. So the way the current implementation, any is just like 1+. So if you have one or more than one, then it passes. All is like the most restrictive. In this scenario, if you had multiple verifiers, then yeah, you could, I guess if you had all, then if one of them failed, then that would have been caught too. If you have any, then I guess, okay, I see what you're saying. If you had any and maybe only one of them passed, but the other one failed.
yeah, because I think
pass.
the current policy just applies to the artifact type
level, yeah.
But if we have multiple verifiers, so it should be a combination of artifact type and the verifier type.
Yeah, that's interesting, because how would you differentiate? Would it be like a artifact type plus verifier name, or how would you? Yeah, I'm not sure what the best way for that would be then.
If we're open to it, our team can pick up some of the investigation on that and file it in an issue for discussion and see what we can come up with. And if we can't come up with anything, then maybe we need to update the docs and enforce multiple artifact types, even if it's the same contents, having a unique type per verifier, if we just have to. But that might be a way forward to continue the discussion in an issue.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, if you could just take that issue. I believe we do have one filed, or just the one you filed, and then.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, sounds good. Okay, moving on to the next one. So, Noel, I think you posted this one about the auth config.
Yeah, I kind of did an improper reading of the quick start and some of the docs, but something I expected to work didn't, and most of the teams hit this now. You know, we've been testing Ratify against Azure Container Registry, and so we wanted to use AZACR login, and when it does the Docker login, you end up with an identity token in your Docker config JSON instead of a username and password. And we didn't want to enable, you know, the admin user over there or anything like that. We just kind of use out of the box. But Ratify doesn't work with that today. And so I've got a working proof of concept link that would extend Ratify to also understand the identity token property.
Okay.
And with this enabled, you can run AZACR login. And then we pass in the correct, you actually pass in the identity token as the password to the ORAS libraries, and things kind of quote just work. It's a really nice experience. I think there was a comment, you know, can you please send a PR for this? And so I'm working on that as well. So I'll have a PR for that, unless we have any reasons why we shouldn't do this.
Nope, I think it looks good. Yeah, I was curious to see kind of how other projects that implement a keychain handle this too, and they do it basically the same way too. So I think we just hadn't gone down this route. So thanks for catching this and sending a PR for that. Okay. Any other thoughts on this one? Okay, now we can, actually, before we move to this one, is there anything else anyone wanted to discuss? Okay, I'll take that as a no. So this one was this issue was recently brought to our attention, and is there someone who can explain this a bit more on the call? Let's see, because this is from Notation. Yeah.
Toddy, are you here?
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry, folks, I'm on my phone because I couldn't connect from my computer. Can somebody at least read? I cannot read. What is the issue about?
Sure. Just quickly going through this. Let's see.
Okay, so this is the multi-tenancy that we were discussing in several discussions. I think what we agreed with Sajay is that at least for the first version of Ratify will not be supporting this scenario. The idea here is that actually you can have different workloads deployed in different namespaces that belong to different, let's say, tenants, and they need to have different keys for verification of the host scenario.
So I think this was going back to discussion on, because we're going to support namespaced multi-tenancy, then you have to support different cloud-specific implementations would need to support different identities depending on the namespace, or however, or having some mapping between like your vault equivalent or your container registry equivalent in each cloud, and which identity to use to grab those resources. Is that related, I think?
I don't know how the different clouds are related here, because you have the normally the expectation is that this will go to the same cloud vendor, but yes, it is similar discussion. So For each namespace, you need to have not only different identity to access, let's say, different KMS or key vault. You also need to have a different a trust policy that is defined for each namespace. It's not only about the identities, it's also about what do you trust, right? But yes, it is related to the different identities for different namespaces also.
So is the topic here just to like, I guess is the action here to like come up with a design for how we're planning to handle this, or just to note that at least initially we're not planning to support multi-tenancy?
I think the decision as of now is that we will not support multi-tenancy that involves namespaces on the cluster. So I don't know how this ended up on the agenda for today. If somebody is interested to have that as part of the first release of Ratify, or
Yeah, it looks like someone had added this, so I'm not sure if who had added it.
is like Rita or Sajay on the call?
Let's see. Doesn't look like it.
Yeah, Luis, do you know anything about that, or did Sajay discuss anything with you, or?
No, he hasn't discussed this with me.
Yeah, if there are no objections, I would say we will not support this on the kind of the first version of Ratify. That's my understanding. But I think it's worth following up with Rita and Sajay, because they had some conversation last week about that. I talked with Sajay. Our agreement was that we should not support it, like for the first version of Ratify or whatever RC we are doing. Of course, we need to come up with a plan how we can support that for V2. But it's not an urgent issue to resolve.
Sure. Samir, I think you have your hand up.
Hey, Tony, just being curious here.
Hey.
So the multi-tenancy you're referring to being actually different customers on, say, a given Kubernetes cluster, or it could be that the same customer has different namespaces for segmentation on the cluster. I'm just trying to understand.
It's more of a like different, think of in different customers.
Oh,
And I can like the scenario is like enterprise and providing compute capacity to different internal teams that are running their different applications, right? And this can vary from kind of even like low security to higher security applications, and they will need to connect to, let's say, different key stores where the keys for those applications are stored.
Interesting. So just to finish that thought process, the workaround will be that you use different clusters versus trying to run different tenant application on the same cluster, just use different clusters.
Yes,
That will be the workaround.
The workaround is yes, use different clusters, but that is more expensive for the customers.
Well, I mean, I guess the alternative is to use the one identity and provide RBAC or role access to multiple key vault. So I guess there's a reduced
reduced security.
It's a reduce the principle of least privilege because you're granting more access to the one identity. So if you have that as a hard requirement, you would have to have multiple clusters until we introduce that support.
Yep.
Okay, I understand now. Thanks.
Okay, I think it wasn't so long discussion.
Yeah, I guess we can. I guess we can follow up on this, and we can discuss this more over the coming weeks. But in that case, is there anything else anyone wanted to discuss?
Yes, I wanted to go back to the first item. I joined a few minutes late. I just left a comment on the first item there. I'm just curious about the pros and cons of doing it as a file mount versus the config store. I don't understand it. So I'm just curious, what are the pros and cons? From a security perspective, both trust store and trust policies need to be protected in the same manner. Because any change, any inadvertent change on either one of those two places will affect the signature verification experience or could negatively impact the trust customers want to derive from it. So just want to make sure that we treat both trust policy and trust store in a similar manner. And as we make a decision between mounted file versus notary verifier config, and I don't understand what that is, I'm curious if somebody can shed more light on it.
I mean, I can talk about it from sort of like a implementation perspective. The using the mounting and using different like file locations, I don't think currently notation has support for that. So for us to be able to use that today means we have to like dynamically cobble together the directory structure for per call. And so I think the idea for being able to just use the in-memory was so that we could like pre-create the trust store for a given configuration. And I don't know that those would have a delta in security implication. And then from like a mounting perspective, using CSI driver versus accessing the secrets from within the process, there's some differences in features. Like we got some stuff for free for using the CSI driver, like the refresh, but it's less flexible because you can't change the mounts once it's running. So having any changes to like a trust store would require, when using mounts, would require rolling the whole pod. So there's at least some of the deltas. I don't know if Bin also might have more context as well.
Yes. So first, I don't think that like impact on the security level, and also my point to make this PI is to make our users like more easier to handle the trust policy and trust store. But this PI is targeting the trust policy, and for the trust policy stuff, if we mount it as a file, so once the file was updated, we also need to write some logic to watch the file updates. And in this PR, we will just move to like CRD, so we can just apply a new like customer resource, so we can just refresh the old config and get a new verifier instead of writing our own like watching logic.
I see. Yeah, I'm not very familiar with the verifier config concepts or Kubernetes concepts, but what I'm hearing you say is that with the mounted file, you'll have to periodically go back and check if the mounted file has changed. But in the case of notary verifier config, you give it once you start the Ratify client, and then if you ever need to change the trust policy, you'll have to just restart the Ratify client. Am I getting it right?
You don't need to restart that. You just need to like run like Kubernetes ETL, apply verifier CRD YAML. So
okay, I got it. Okay, thank you. That answers it. Appreciate it. Yeah, I think that's a better experience based on what you described. Thank you. I am supportive of this now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, any more questions on this? I think in that case, Bin, it looked pretty good to me apart from the comment, and then it should be good to merge once you've added the extra bits to the config.json.
Yeah, thank you.
I think Sajay has joined now. Sajay, we were discussing a bit about the multi-tenancy scenario for Ratify. Toddy just mentioned that it's kind of pushed out a bit and may not be in scope for RC1. So do we want to continue discussions with that, or should we just table it for now?
From the last call, we discussed, we actually had opened up the discussion whether we should be timeline bound or feature bound. Multi-tenancy is going to take a significant amount of time. So I think it maybe makes sense to get a RC1 release out and let customers give feedback what they like or don't like. That will help us at least fix bugs and maybe keep the monthly cadence, or at least once in 2 months make the release happen. And we'll see how it aligns is what I'm thinking. So it makes sense to me. I'm supportive of maybe scoping it and making a release more than adding more things and then delaying the release.
Sounds good. Does any other topics to discuss? Anyone?
This is Noel here. I have one that I'd like to just kind of ask the group about. Maybe we have an answer, or maybe we should file an issue and discuss later. We're kind of working in this model where we've got the verifiers that are built into Ratify. We've got a couple of I don't know, you might call like plugin verifiers for SBOM and license checker that get in the Docker file. The SBOM one gets included as part of the image. So my question is really around, how do we intend or want customers to bring like a custom verifier? Let's say that I write a verifier that does something useful and they want to pull this thing in and run it. For a binary plugin, what does that experience look like? We've done some experiments where they copy in the binary and kind of like remint a Ratify image themselves. That works, but then they have to kind of keep up to date with Ratify. And we've got another one where it was a little bit more interesting, where with a Helm, it's a Helm post render task, basically an init container that pulls the plugin in and copies it into a volume, and then Ratify is configured to use that as a plugin directory. I wanted to ask if there were any other options that the team has thought about or experimented with, and kind of like, what's the intended flow for binary plugins when customers are wanting to bring their own things but not have to build up all of Ratify themselves.
I think the options, at least for now, are to, like you were saying, you could do an init container that does a live pull, or you can do some other sort of volume mount to add that to the container. But those are kind of the only options for binary right now. I think that there's another group working on a gRPC update for being able to like call out two things, so you could potentially run it separately, but I don't know if we have a complete example of that, or if we've really explored what that would look like end to end. So I think at least for now, it would just be either init container or volume mounting, or like you're saying, build your own container based on the base.
Cool. Yeah, makes sense. Thanks.
That's actually an interesting scenario, Noel. If you wouldn't mind, maybe we should file an issue so we can kind of track this too.
Yeah, absolutely. We can file an issue, and we've got a doc. It's rough. We'll capture that into a readable format and stick that in an issue for discussion, and we can keep the thread going on that.
Sounds good. Thanks. Okay.
Hey, Akash, Samir here again. Sorry to jump in without raising the hand. With Toddy being here, we're just wondering if now that we made a decision about multi-tenancy not being for RC1, what is the date for RC1? Or we don't have a date yet, or is there a date for date by when we'll be able to project an RC1 date, release date?
Well, we're trying to branch on the week of December 5th.
Mm.
That aligns with the notary RC1 new release date. So that's what we're trying to target at this point.
Yeah, but that was for the beta release, right? The beta 2. I was thinking.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. So yeah. So yeah, we still don't know what RC1 is gonna be on.
Okay.
We're targeting somewhere January, but we don't have an exact date.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry about that.
That's fine. Yeah, thanks. There's so many RC ones going around here, so completely understand that. Yeah.
Yep.
I think like in my discussion with people who want to use it, we have done demos, but people really want to use it on their own. So an RC1 is a minimum thing before people will be able to use it on their own versus just being in a demo environment. So I think RC1, getting to an RC1 should happen. It will unblock a lot more people to start using Ratify.
Right. Yeah, we're trying to make a decision based on when we can make the best end-to-end for notary and other services. But right now we're looking somewhere in January. We cannot. I don't think we can be more specific than that.
Okay. Yeah. Let's come back maybe in beginning of the year and see where we are, or maybe in a few weeks. What's remaining? Yeah, makes sense. Thanks.
So, Samir, I think in yesterday's notary call, we were asking if anybody could give this a shot with Notary RC1. The problem is there is no notation CLI for RC1 to test, right? So what do we want to do? Like, because I think there was a push to get some kind of a release cut or something from Ratify. Is there anything pending, Bin, that needs to be checked in on the Ratify side? I mean, I know it's from a private branch and all that.
I think I can just merge the PR or
Okay.
move policy and settle.
Okay, so we should be able to get the tests going. And for notation, I think the idea is to use maybe a test bill from Patrick's branch or somebody, because the RC1 is being cut, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay. Samir, would that be good enough, or is there anything else that we need to look at?
No, I think from where we are, it should be good enough for getting something in people's hand by early next week.
Okay, cool. I mean, yeah, more bugs, the better. If we can find it early, that would be nice to fix it before. Because I know that Louis has been pushing for test coverage for Ratify, and I think that's his P0 for December. And that's one of the reasons why we decided not to add more, but just make sure the quality is improved over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah,
right.
That makes complete sense. Yeah, with December being a short month, the sooner we get Ratify beta 2 out to people in people's heads, we can get some experience comments back.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks for driving this, Akash.
Thanks again. Yeah.
And any other discussions? We have a few minutes left.
Question for Noel. Any insight into what kind of plugins people would like to write? I mean, I think the fact that Eric mentioned is we haven't paid much attention for bring your own verifiers into a custom image with a build pipeline or something like that. But the provisions have been there because we understood this would happen. So what kind of pipelines were you anticipating, or verifiers were you anticipating?
It might be a question for people, not me. Yeah, the big three that we kind of have in mind to enable our customers with are signatures, which we have via Notary V2, SBOMs, where we have the one that's in the Ratify repo now. and it's kind of a basic, it will load in and read that it is a JSON format. And other than that, it exists, right? And then the last one was really around vulnerabilities. And so really around, cool, you've got an SBOM. Great, what do you want to do with that? And so what we've been talking about this week is, I think we could build a Ratify verifier that, took an SPDX and went and called against some service and did a scan, but I'm not sure that's the right place for a customer to be doing that work. And it misses a few scenarios where like you might have something running and you didn't do a redeploy, so you've got something vulnerable, but you never knew about it, right? So it's a complicated way of saying I'm not sure yet. But we just want to make sure that when they are writing verifiers, that they have kind of a well-known path to plug those in multiple contexts. So for a pipeline, that one seems pretty straightforward. Make sure the files are in the right locations, they're good to go. In Kubernetes, we've got CRDs, which we've been testing those and they've been working really great. So kudos to the team and Susan, who I know is out today, but those work really well. We've been really successful with that. And one of the missing pieces is, what's kind of the official way to get a binary plugin into their environments. And we've got some things that work, but if we like those and want to adopt those, it would be great to get those added to official Ratify docs as kind of like, here's how you do it.
Awesome. Yeah, I think we're totally supportive of it. And
Awesome.
One of the challenges I think we want to keep in mind is running anything inside Kubernetes, you're going to hit against the timeouts and the limits. So
yeah, exactly.
There's different scenarios, right? When you were running a CI/CD, you have maybe hours to do the work versus you have 3 seconds to do the work in Kubernetes. So that's one of the things why having maybe a vulnerability scan go out from the SPDX and look at packages is totally fine to run Ratify within that pipeline as a verifier. Also, I think that's a valid scenario. But if you want to run it within Gatekeeper and the external data provider, that only lasts like 7 seconds. So
yeah. And to date, I think the thing at least I've been thinking of is, there may be something out of band that needs to be, maybe it still uses some of the Ratify engine in some kind of a function or a periodic process to scan the images and SBOMs that we know about, but that really needs to get reported out somewhere else. And that could be another artifact, it could be a custom type called, validation scan results. And then Gatekeeper could read something very tiny and small that says like, this is good. This is a score of, 6.1 out of 10, and you can make decisions that way. But we're still trying to figure out how we want to make that work.
Oh, that sounds cool. So you'd basically summarize the data into just one artifact or something that you can study. Okay.
Almost like a here's my report card for the whole thing. And if you did it that way, honestly, you would only really need to refer to that if you had a robust system, because you would kind of trust your own report card and you put whatever you want into it, rather than having an army of verifiers to scan SBOMs and signatures and all these other things. Maybe you still do signatures, but you might have a report card with signatures instead of SBOMs and license checker and all of this stuff. Really to try to keep that time down, because we know we have 3 seconds for Gatekeeper by default, right?
Right. And this is very much in line with what we discussed in the OCI calls. I think the idea is to keep the number of referrers small, but to keep them almost like a point query where you can ask for, give me the top scans. And because even though the spec doesn't call it out, ACR is implementing it by using created time as a way to sort it. So you will get the top. We need to move that to the spec, but that's a longer discussion. But the idea is to kind of like compose on top and then put, it's almost like an attestation at this point, right? Like attaching it. So if you have like a summary doc or a summary reference that says, okay, this is my vulnerability scan that I did and it's all looking good, go ahead with it. Then you can just depend on that one doc in some way.
Right. And you mentioned, because we are doing our testing against ACR, so the results that come back, they have the created field, and we could, sort by the latest one and gather the most recent, report card for our artifact, and just look at the most recent one rather than, trying to iterate over, dozens of these things. Right.
And are you using the annotations right now, or?
No, right now we haven't really gotten that far into implementation or even spiking on this. These are just things that we were thinking about this morning in one of our calls.
Cool. nice to hear how people are actually using it.
We're figuring it out as we go. It's like everybody else. Thanks for the collaboration.
And thank you.
Yeah, I'd be interested also, like, very interested in those use cases, specifically like if whatever we are going to work with is like a standardized format that we can potentially have a nice upstream plugin for that people can just parameterize, then like it potentially alleviates people from having to bring their own. So if there's any opportunities for that sort of thing that could, you know, be an easy win for Ratify in general and open that use case up to a lot of people, then that would be good to explore.
Yeah, for sure. And I totally agree. We don't want to invent something new if there's already a format or a standard for this. And I don't know the answer to that yet.
All right. Any other topics, or we can end early as well? Okay, sounds good. Give you a few minutes back. Thank you all for joining this week, and hopefully we'll see you all next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you, folks.
Like,
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thanks, okay.